What is your number one motivation for upgrading or changing your gaming setup? If you want to make your computer stronger or switch to a different console, what does it take to get you to do that? Or maybe you just want to add a console to your lineup of gaming equipment. What's the thing that tips the scales for you? For some, it's having the absolute best equipment. The latest and greatest video cards quickly find their way into your shopping cart and end up on your front porch. You gotta stay on the cutting edge, right? For others, it's all about those exclusive games. They have to play the latest Zelda, or they simply can't miss out on the next Spider-Man game. Well, PlayStation has their sights set on more than just would-be console owners. Herman Hulst, newly named co-CEO of PlayStation, recently outlined a Sony strategy for bringing games to PC. The unsurprising part was that they will continue to launch their live service games day and date on PC. This is something that he outlined years ago, and you can see it in Helldivers 2, and then recently Concord. They made it very clear that game is hitting both platforms, and then Bungie's yet-to-be-seen Marathon will also be hitting day and date PC as well as PS5. But the more surprising part, according to some, is that Herman Hulst sees the big tentpole first-party narrative-driven games as a potential driver to PC users to come to the PlayStation platform. He called this a dual approach, one where live service hits day and date on PC, but then those tentpole titles, they are seen as the backbone of the PlayStation platform, and they're finding a new audience on PC, but they may have people interested in sequels enough to join the PlayStation platform. At least that's what they're hoping they see happen. They're also seeing this take place with other media like TV shows and movies serving that purpose. Well, this strategy, now vocalized and in view of the public, it was met with a lot of skepticism and doubt. Sure, all those very expensive PCs, they're just too good, right? There's too much of an investment in a high-end PC to get those users to make the jump to console. And given the cadence of PlayStation games coming to PC, that's even been speeding up a bit, where games like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok are landing just roughly 2 years after their release. Many PC users are saying, listen, I'll just wait. There's really no reason for me to switch. But I believe the devil is always in the details, and in this situation, the devil is in the data. Now, every week here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to know what you think. So if you want more content like this, be sure to hit subscribe. And in this video, I'm first going to start by just looking at the numbers, okay? There's a lot to consider. How many PlayStation 5 owners didn't even own a PlayStation 4? How many gaming PCs in the market right now are hitting top-level performance? Just how many people are willing to get a PlayStation 5 rather than wait? Now, the second thing I want to talk about and look at is the requirement to linking and making a PlayStation account for games like God of War Ragnarok, as well as all games going forward when PlayStation ports them over. I have been openly critical about this, and I still am, but the strategy is one that's starting to make sense when you consider the bigger picture. Now, this doesn't mean my opinion on this has changed, by the way. I am still going to talk about it. The last thing I want to talk about is I'm just going to give you my opinion in conclusion on what I think is going on. Much debating recently has taken place about whether or not PC players would make the switch. But before we get into that, what do the numbers say? When looking at the various reports and stats about PC gamers, hardware, and PlayStation, it's important to remember we are really only asking the question, is there a percentage of users on PC that would be willing to buy a PlayStation 5 or a PS5 Pro after playing a PlayStation game on their PC? And we're going to start with the most obvious way to ask and answer this question. Polls on Twitter. Now, obviously, this is not scientific, okay? We'll get into some more actual data in a moment, but there is, I think, something that can be learned from this. There is, I believe, a general willingness that we've seen from purchases that people might be motivated to then make a switch or upgrade. People that took this poll may not even have a PC, or they may already have a PS5, so it's not exactly scientific, but Tom Warren from The Verge put out 2 different polls, and he was one of the gaming pundits who expressed a pretty good amount of skepticism about this strategy from PlayStation. So let's just start with the first poll. He asked a very simple question. He said, PC gamers, would you buy a PS5 to play a sequel of a PlayStation PC game or just wait it out? And at first glance, you're going to say, well, look, case closed. The overwhelming majority said no, right? But in my estimation, this isn't about the amount that said no. It's about the amount that said yes. roughly 23% said that they would buy a PS5 to play a sequel. If that willingness is even remotely accurate, then the strategy from PlayStation is sound. It means that every time they sell a game like Spider-Man or God of War, the most recent port of Ghost of Tsushima, the sequel then stands a very decent chance of getting people to convert over or just buy a PlayStation 5 in general. If you sell 1 million copies of a game, this poll seems to indicate that over 200,000 people would be willing to buy a PS5 to play that game's sequel. And consider, in the absence of this strategy, if they were not doing this, that's a lot of people that would never really be given a reason to consider getting a PS5. You're basically touching and reaching an audience you wouldn't reach otherwise. But his second poll is even more telling, because he broadens the question to be more about, well, would you be willing to buy a console for GTA 6? And he said the following. He said, PC gamers, would you buy a PS5 or Xbox Series X to play GTA 6 next year, or just wait it out for the PC release? And this poll is far more split, with 46% saying yes, they would be willing to buy a console to play GTA 6. And GTA 6 is primed to probably be the best-selling game of 2025, which could lead to a lot of PC users making the jump. Keep this in mind for later. But wait, you might say, hang on a minute. Wouldn't that mean that all these people are downgrading? They're going to get weaker performance on a console, right? Why wouldn't they just wait if they're going to be doing essentially a downgrade? Wouldn't most PC users refuse just based on that principle alone? This is where Steam is helpful. First, a recent report from PCGamesN.com claims that Steam now boasts a brand new record of concurrent players, hitting 36 million players at a given time. So keep that number in mind when you're thinking about the hardware trends that we're going to talk about. And that's just concurrent players. If you want to look at the actual monthly active users, DemandSage.com reported the following. According to the latest data, there are 132 million monthly active users on Steam. So it goes without saying, Steam has a lot of users and a lot of people logging in to buy and play games. Now, building on this, we have to examine what percentage of the Steam user base actually has a PC stronger than a PS5. I quickly added up the percentages on Steam Hardware Survey, and just with like crude rough estimation, I saw roughly 40% of the graphics cards were either 30 series NVIDIA cards or 40 series NVIDIA cards. Now, NVIDIA makes up the vast majority of the cards on this report, about 80%. And Tom's Hardware reported a very similar number to my crude estimation. There was like a 10% for the one and 28 for the other. Add those together, you get 38%. So that was very similar to my findings. Now, that doesn't mean that all of these cards are exactly stronger. So another user looked into this. Nib95 on Twitter went further. He used Tech Power Up GPU performance rankings to see which cards would be at least 10% stronger than the equivalent card of a PS5. And he found that approximately 25% of Steam PC users had a GPU that you could argue was tangibly stronger than a PS5. Now remember, these hardware reports on Steam, they're self-selecting, so people have to like opt in to like report this, okay? Not everybody does that. So we're somewhere between 25 and 40%. If you feel like Nib's number is too low, if you feel like my number's too high, like 40% seems too high and 25% seems low. If we go just in the middle, let's say around 30 to 33%, that means roughly 1/3 of the PC user base would have hardware, and they would likely wait. They would say, my hardware is stronger than a PS5. They have hardware that they've invested in. They're probably considered early adopters. They've spent good money on their system, okay? This doesn't mean that they would never buy a PS5. I know people in my own community, they have very strong PCs, and they got a PS5 because they really wanted to play God of War Ragnarok, right? They're into this hobby. They spend into it, and buying the PlayStation 5 was just another purchase in their mind. But we're going with the logic that those with tangibly weaker systems than the PlayStation 5 would be more likely or more willing to switch and add a PS5 to their setup. This means roughly 2/3 of the Steam user base could be in that camp. That's roughly 87 million people that are on PCs that are weaker than a PS5. Now, if you think my estimation is just way too high, just if it's just half, right? If maybe 60 million people on Steam are on a rig where they just couldn't quite get as good of performance or the games didn't run as well, that's a lot of people. Even if you round it down, it's still a ton of people. It's a very big user base who could play a game like Ghost of Tsushima and they have to run it at mid to low settings, and then they're looking at performance of the sequel on the PlayStation 5 or maybe even the PlayStation 5 Pro. This isn't even considering the fact that there are lots of people in that number. They don't even have PCs strong enough to run some of these PlayStation ports. A good number of these people don't even meet memory requirements, right? Now, when the sequel trailers to a game like this drop, and maybe it's PS5 Pro enhanced, that is targeting, according to the rumors, 4K 60, or even some of the modes that just have ray tracing are going to hit like 1440 60, according to the rumors and the leaks from notable insiders. That is an awful lot of people who could play Ghost of Tsushima, a game like it, or God of War, and then the sequel is getting better performance than they got in the first game. And honestly, we have stats to indicate that maybe people are already doing this. According to a recent report from Sony, they say the following: nearly 30% of PS5's MAUs are users who never used a PS4. So with the spread of PS5, the acquisition of new users is progressing. Okay, you have to think about that. That's a good number. With PS5 nearing 60 million total units, that's almost 20 million people who bought a PlayStation 5 and they never used a PS4. They're a new user. Now, that could be a first-time console buyer. Maybe they're just finally deciding to buy a console. It could be folks who are not wanting their Xbox anymore, or maybe they're just adding it to their lineup. They have Xbox, but they're adding this. And maybe these are PC users. I even think there's a clue that some of these people could be PC users if you look at how well God of War Ragnarok sold. From that very same report, on the very next page, it says, in terms of software for PlayStation, the new title, God of War Ragnarok, recorded sales of more than 11 million copies in the first 10 weeks after its release on November 9, making it the fastest-selling first-party title ever. And we know Spider-Man 2 recently also hit 11 million copies sold as well. It seems like there's some correlating data points here. A third of the people on PlayStation 5 didn't have a PS4, and two sequels that had their first games ported to PC have sold incredibly well, even one faster than their predecessors. Even Horizon Forbidden West has now been credited with outselling the first game. That's another sequel that had its first game ported to PC. It's hard to say that none of those people are PC ports, that this many people are now buying PlayStation 5 who weren't on PS4 before, and we're seeing correlating data in the sequels of those games selling incredibly well. Just in my own limited sampling within my own community that sort of hangs out on the channel or in my Discord, I know of 5 people who got a PS5 because they wanted to play a sequel of a game they played on their PC. One of these people, another who hasn't done this yet, they're actually planning to get the PlayStation 5 Pro when it comes out. And according to another report, due to PS5 penetration and the popularity of Helldivers 2 and Fortnite, the MAU of PlayStation has grown 9% year over year to 118 million accounts in March. So, PlayStation's growing its user base. That's what this is about. And if this strategy is paying off, there's one more thing to consider. Why is PlayStation now requiring PSN accounts for their PC ports? Now, very quickly before giving you my conclusion, the recent dust-up over requiring PSN logins for PC ports has gone through a variety of stages. First, they had it turned off in Helldivers 2 for 3 months, and then they were going to turn it back on. And this turned into a fiasco. The game was review bombed, and PlayStation walked back the requirement, but now that game is not being sold in those regions who can't get a PSN. This led to Ghost of Tsushima announcing that you would need a PSN for the Legends multiplayer mode, but not for the main campaign, and Ghost of Tsushima was also then limited and not sold in those regions. Now, this leads to the most recent development. God of War Ragnarok, a completely single-player game, will require you to link your Steam account with the PSN, and that means the game is also not being sold in those regions. Now, keep in mind, they didn't do this for the first God of War when it was brought to PC. Now, I have expressed why I think this is backwards and unhelpful. I've even called this stupid, because I don't like seeing consumers blocked from purchasing games that I think are so good. Ghost of Tsushima is one of my all-time favorite games. God of War Ragnarok was my personal favorite that year that it came out. I thought it was wonderful. But I think I probably don't matter very much to PlayStation. Like, if I give my opinion on this, they're probably like, listen, man, we don't care that you're upset about this. They are trying to grow their MAU as well as get folks to switch. Remember all those numbers, all those data points we looked at. If they can get a percentage of those people to make and link a PSN account every time they drop a big game on PC, they're just increasing the likelihood of those people buying a PlayStation 5. They already have an account. They already have trophies. They have tracked playtime. They are subversively getting PC users invested in an ecosystem that they may want to join in the future. And honestly, I think this points at PlayStation having a vested interest in creating their own launcher, so then you could have potentially cross ownership and another reason to make the switch or just to add PlayStation 5 to your gaming setup. Remember, all those people that have gaming rigs that aren't that strong would see this as pretty compelling. And all of this leads to my conclusion on the matter. I do not think this is a matter of if this plan is working, the one outlined by Herman Holst. I think this plan already is working. We have very clear data points that show both a majority of the PC user base is in a prime situation to do what would essentially be an upgrade for $500 to the PS5. And if the PS5 Pro hits, and it hits any of the targets that we're hearing about from the leaks, then a $600 price point will feel like a bargain to anybody who's on a mid to low-end PC if they're looking into upgrading their computer. PlayStation isn't targeting high-end PC users because they aren't even a majority of the gaming PC community anyway. They will gladly take your money, as their PC ports have mostly been receiving high marks and praise from both the tech outlets as well as the PC user base. Even in recent years, gamers have shown a willingness to not just pre-order games, but to buy the more expensive edition for early access. Well, imagine not just paying for 2 years of early access to a game instead of waiting, but the performance of this device that you're buying would be better than the current PC that you have. In my estimation, two things hitting the market are really going to help this strategy get more traction, and they may end up being tag team partners. The first is the PS5 Pro, which I'm on record saying I believe it will be market disruptive because of how it will appeal to developers, but I also think with regard to this PC gamer strategy, it could prove to be very potent. And the second thing, as previously mentioned in the Twitter poll, GTA 6 will see a lot of PC users making the jump. And the PS5 Pro may be standing there, arms wide open, as the best place to play the most popular game of 2025. So yes, there are a good amount of PC users that will just wait. But from my own research and looking at the data, there are an equal amount of gamers out there in a position on PC that may see switching as not just switching, but as an upgrade, as a great addition to their gaming setup. But those are just my thoughts. Now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do that in a comment below or join the live stream discussion that will follow this. There'll be a card right here, as well as a linked and pinned comment below. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.